Hey class, this is Coach Nelson and
Coach Holmes.
we're going to talk to you about plant reproduction. All right, get excited. Basically, plants can reproduce in two different ways. Some types of plants reproduce with spores and others reproduce with seeds. And I'm going to talk to you first off about plants that reproduce with spores. Okay, spores are basically reproductive cells that, without being fertilized, can grow into a brand new plant. So plants that reproduce with spores will actually they first grow into a certain type of organism that you see right here, and then this organism will create the sperm and the egg, which will then grow into this type of organism. So they cycle back and forth. And that's basically all you need to know about spores, except for the fact that they need water for reproduction, so they'll grow in water-rich areas. And that is the main distinction between things with spores and things that Coach Holmes is going to talk to you about that grow with seeds. So, well, I guess I'll talk about seeds real quick. A seed is an adaptation that is very useful and has allowed plants to grow in environments that aren't rich in water. What a seed is, it's got a protective coat that goes around it. Inside it's got a food source, and then it's got an embryo or a baby plant. It's not a haploid. This is a brand new baby plant inside of here, and that protective coat can keep that baby plant protected for quite a time. And that allows the seeds to grow in places that typically aren't rich in water. Okay. First type of plant that reproduces with seeds are called gymnosperms. Gymnosperms have a naked seed, so their seed is not covered in fruit. So you may recognize this as a pine cone, and what a pine cone is, it's got little seeds inside of each of these little shingles here. And the way that a gymnosperm will reproduce is that it'll create lots and lots and lots of pollen and then release the pollen into the air. And the pollen is the male gameto. It's like the male sperm, basically. It has half the DNA. And hopefully that pollen will be transported through the air and will land on the female reproductive part, which is this pine cone right here. And if that happens, then the pollen will fertilize the cone and make seeds, and then those seeds can grow into new plants or new gymnosperms. So that's the gymnosperm. It's a naked seed. It doesn't have any flesh that grows around it to protect it, or fruit. Okay, now Coach Holmes is going to talk to you about
Angiosperms. Thanks, Coach Nelson.
You're welcome.
Okay, so we're talking about flowers that make seeds. The difference between angiosperms and gymnosperms is that angiosperms produce some kind of a flower or a fruit that covers their seeds. The reason this is important is because this flower is usually brightly colored, or it smells very nicely, and it attracts other species to the angiosperm or the flower or the plant, which in turn helps the pollination process. So the bugs and insects that are attracted to this colorful flower right here will pick up pollen and carry it from this flower to another flower really far away. Another possibility is that the seeds grow on a fruit, which can be eaten by an organism. The organism goes somewhere else really far away and defecates the seeds out onto the ground in a totally new location. So that's the difference between angiosperms, is that they are flowering plants. Any plant you see with a flower on it is an angiosperm. And they're actually very common because angiosperms are so good at what they do, which is attracting other species to their flowers to help the pollination process. So you see angiosperms quite commonly. So speaking of angiosperms, here are the parts of a flower. And really important to know about a flower is the stamen and the carpel. The stamen right here is the male part of the flower. The stamen has two parts to it. The top part, which is the anther, and the bottom part, which is the filament. The stamen is considered the male part of the flower because the anther makes pollen, which is like the sperm of the flower. And the pollen gets carried away It might get picked up by a different flower. It could even be picked up by this same flower in the female organ called the carpel. And the carpel is made of 3 different parts. The stigma, which is like the opening, the style, which is like the tube which leads down to the ovary. And down here at the ovary is the female part of the flower. So when the pollen that was made by the anther flies through the air and lands on the stigma, which travels on the style to the ovary, that's when a seed is made. And the seed will now grow in the flower, oftentimes bearing fruit. Okay, so there's the parts of the flower. Important to know what is the male and female part of the flower. Alrighty. Okay, so once flowers become fertilized, they grow into fruit. Peas, believe it or not, are the fruit of a fertilized pea flower. And raspberries are an example of a fruit from a fertilized raspberry flower. A fertilized pineapple inflorescence will grow into a pineapple fruit. And then, of course, we all know apples grow on apple trees, and the apple flowers on the apple trees are what will, when fertilized, grow into the apple. The ovary will. So you're actually eating the ripe ovary of a flower. So think about that next time you bite into an apple. Okay, and lastly here, there are 2 types of angiosperms. Again, angiosperms are flowering plants, and there's two types. Monocots, whose seeds sprout only 1 leaf, and dicots, whose seeds sprout 2 leaves. So if you got a seed from an angiosperm that was a monocot and you planted it in the ground, only 1 little leaf would grow from that seed. Hence the name monocot. And if you got a seed from an angiosperm that was a dicot and you planted that seed in the ground, 2 little leaves would grow from it. Hence the name dicot. And if you wanted to figure out or learn more about monocots and dicots, you can pause the video and look at this chart right here, which has some great information about monocots and dicots. All right, well, this is Coach Holmes and
Coach